Kundgebung zum Thema Philippinen, der EDSA-Revolution, wir haben Jahrestag.
Duterte panagutin! Justice for the victims of Duterte's crime! Justice delayed is justice denied! Justice delayed is justice denied! Marcos Singilin! Marcos Singilin! Duterte panagutin! Marcos Singilin! Marcos Singilin! Duterte panagutin!
Gut, die Krankenfahrt kannst du mich nachher fragen. Wir machen jetzt mal hier die Philippinen. Hier ist die Jahrestag der EDSA-Revolution, wird hier gerade begangen. Das war eine sehr friedliche Revolution. Das Volk selber hatte nur Gebete, Lieder und Menschenketten. Und der Diktator schickte sogar Kampfhubschrauber und Panzer los gegen friedlich protestierende Menschen. Die Soldaten befolgten aber nicht den Befehl. Die verweigerten auch den Gehorsam. Was dann dazu führte, dass er sich nach 3 Tagen mit Hilfe der USA nach Hawaii zurückzog und dort nach 3 Jahren starb. Marcos selber, wie gesagt, nicht nur 10 Milliarden in den Philippinen probiert zu rauben, als ein Muster ist wieder aufgetaucht. Aber er hatte natürlich auch ca. 100.000 Menschen wurden Opfer seiner Herrschaft durch verschwinden lassen, durch Massenmorde, Massaker, Folter und. Also ziemlich umfangreich.
Never again, never again, never again to martial law. EDSA! 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 Babadsa! Babadsa!
Laura, in Deutschland sind ca. 250.000, mehrere hunderttausend Haftbefehle auf. Was willst du damit 250? Was willst du jetzt damit sagen?
Okay, thank you everyone for being here today.
Nö, wir lauschen
is
hier mal lieber
25th
weiter.
of February. It is the 40th year anniversary of EDSA. So we are here to commemorate, we are here to celebrate, and we are also here to fight beyond this moment to honor the freedom fighters before us and carry on that legacy. So EDSA, that was 1986 when around 2 million Filipinos disobeyed the state orders and they revolted for days and they brought on this moment, they brought on the People's Uprising, which toppled the Marcos dictatorship. But we are going to hear a lot of speeches to hear about the martial law era of Marcos, and we are also going to talk or hear about the things that we still have to fight for, the reasons why we still have to
Direkt von der
organize
philippinischen
and
Botschaft.
grow our
Hier geht es um
movements.
die sogenannte
Especially here in
EDSA-Revolution,
Berlin
welche
in Diaspora,
1986
and
stattfand gegen die damalige
duty that we
Diktator
carry
Marcos
as Philippine diaspora.
und seine Frau Ismael oder so ähnlich. Jedenfalls die damals riesen Fotos gemacht hat mit einer riesen Schuhsammlung unter anderem. Auf das Konto von Marcos gehen ca. 100.000 verschwundene Menschen, inhaftierte Menschen, gefolterte Menschen und. Also sehr viele Menschen. Das Volk selber protestierte friedlich gegen mit Gebeten, Liedern,
Hello
Menschenketten
everybody, I am Cody, speaking
und
on
so weiter und so
behalf
fort.
of Alphas Filipinas,
Und er musste sich damals dann nach Hawaii zurückziehen mit freundlicher Unterstützung und Zollabfertigung durch die USA. Ich habe euch da mal was rausgesucht, wie viel er hatte. Aber wir hören jetzt
as
erstmal
part
zu.
of the National Democratic Filipino Mass Movement. We are happy to be with you all on such an important day for our community. Today, Filipinos all around the world are gathering to celebrate the EDSA uprising, the massive people's demonstration in February of 1986 that brought down the US-backed Marcos Sr. dictatorship. As we remember EDSA, we also remember and honor all those who suffered under the Marcos dictatorship. During Marcos's rule, there were countless human rights violations, heavily targeting political opponents, journalists, farmers, student activists, progressive church workers, and anyone who spoke out against the dictatorship. The implementation of martial law in 1972 instilled fear through heavy militarization, extrajudicial killings, torture, enforced disappearances, and imprisonment. Meanwhile, Marcos enriched his family and cronies by siphoning public funds, leaving the Filipino people more impoverished and with ever less access to land, stable work, or decent livelihoods. All of this occurred under the protective wing of the United States, which, despite having granted the Philippines independence, still to this day holds an active imperial financial interest in the plunder of our land, resources, and labor force. The EDSA People Power Uprising of February 1986 successfully toppled Marcos, and this we celebrate. But as we celebrate, we also recognize that the systemic problems of Philippine society persisted even after Marcos fell. EDSA signified an incredible achievement for the Filipino people and a shift in political consciousness, but it did not overhaul the infrastructure of oppression. Today, it has become clearer than ever that systemic corruption and state-backed violence remain embedded in our political system. Marcos noon, Marcos ngayon, Marcos then, Marcos now. Marcos Sr.'s next baby, Marcos Jr., continues his father's legacy today. We are far from achieving land justice in the Philippines. Land ownership is concentrated in the hands of corporations, large landlord families, and political dynasties. Our industries are dominated by imperialist foreign interests. Our raw natural resources are exported en masse while we import expensive finished products. The archipelago is scattered with U.S. military bases whose soldiers soil our land and assault our people. Under bureaucrat capitalism, politics is a business of plunder and corruption. Billions of pesos apparently vanish into infrastructure projects that never materialize or that are executed with such negligence that they endanger lives, collapsing bridges, faulty dams, and the like, and the money is going into our leaders' pockets. Our families left the Philippines because wealth and land are hoarded by an elite ruling class. As Filipinos in the diaspora, we inherit the political legacy of earlier freedom fighters. We are children of the diaspora because bureaucrat capitalists turned our people into exports while neglecting the public sector, healthcare, education, infrastructure, which leads to ever more Filipinos being forced to migrate. Overseas Filipino workers, OFWs, fill labor shortages in the global north, primarily as care workers and service workers. They remain underrepresented in political spaces, and our diaspora identity is built around labor, sacrifice, and invisibility. We, children of the diaspora, know that imperialist countries teach our history either not at all or through colonial narratives. Our legacies of resistance were not be taught to us by our colonizers. We know that imperialist nations systemically depoliticize our ancestors' uprisings. It is our right and our duty to reclaim and to share the stories of our ancestors, to understand the social conditions affecting our communities at home and the systemic issues that plague them now, and to process the intergenerational trauma inflicted by centuries of colonial violence in meaningful community here in the diaspora. It is our honor to stand in solidarity with and learn from other racialized communities in the imperial core and to challenge regressive narratives around migration. By recognize our struggles alongside those of Palestinians, Haitians, Sudanese, Kurds, and other anti-imperialist movements, we strengthen global liberation efforts. A pivotal development for global accountability is the ICC indicting former President Rodrigo Duterte for crimes against humanity. It is the first time an Asian former head of state has been indicted at The Hague, and we, here in Europe, amplify the call of the estimated 30,000 victims' families to bring Duterte to justice. We demand that Duterte's murderous campaign against the shamed and impoverished be examined and condemned for the world to see. And we hope that this precedent can inspire others oppressed by corrupt puppet leaders to confront impunity. Continuing the struggle means confronting the systems that push us and countless relatives of ours into the diaspora. Commemorating EDSA is not merely nostalgic sentiment, it is a matter of survival and dignity. Altas Filipinas calls on our fellow children of the Philippine diaspora to organize alongside us for a liberated Philippines and for freedom for all Filipinos at home and abroad, for the freedom to move, to stay, to vote, to gain an education, to earn a dignified living, to grow and eat nourishing food, to be children when we're children, to have agency over our bodies, to see our families without political or financial obstacles. Down with imperialism, down with impunity, down with corruption. Marcos Duterte, patalsikin, wakasan ang pure kapitalismo.
Ja, Jude, du bist langweilig, richtig gut. Aber wie gesagt, das Thema ist interessant. Wie gesagt, es geht um eine sehr friedliche Revolution, die wir in Deutschland jetzt nicht so mitbekommen haben oder kennen. In der EDSA-Revolution 1986 in den Philippinen. Das Volk selber, wie gesagt, demonstrierte friedlich mit Menschenketten gegen Herrn Marcos und gebeten. Herr Marcos, der zu seinem Militärgang scheiterte und konnte sich selber nicht zu sagen, nee, das ist eine kleine philippinische Kundgebung, da müssen wir auch mal kurz nur auf Englisch reden, den Rest mache ich dir. Da bin ich mal gnädig bei denen.
Imperialismo.
Und interessant ist tatsächlich, obwohl Marcos bekanntermaßen da schon als Massenmörder galt, durfte er trotzdem Asyl in den USA bekommen und auf den schönen Hawaii, ja, die Insel, die zu den USA gehört, durfte er 3 Jahre sich bis zu seinem Tode sozusagen wieder Strafverfolgung entziehen. Er selber versuchte mit 10 Milliarden davon zu kommen, davon ist die Hälfte jetzt mittlerweile wieder aufgetaucht oder sichergestellt, die andere Hälfte, da stellen sich unter den Schweizer Banken, Offshore-Banken und so ganz stur, so nach dem Motto, das kann von mir nicht rausholen.
The confirmation of charges against Duterte has finally started, and Ina will speak on her experience, what we witnessed in Lahore.
Okay, say with me. Duterte Managuti! Duterte Managuti! Louder! Duterte Managuti! Duterte Managuti! Justicia! Justicia!
Und die USA flogen übrigens auch dann am 3. Tag der EDSA-Revolution aus, in Sicherheit. Im Gepäck waren dann noch, also er reiste nicht mit leichtem Gepäck, sein Reisegepäck betrug etwa Minimum 10 Millionen. Davon mehrere Goldbarren, Juwelen, Schmuck, alles drum und dran, was später dann als unrechtmäßig wieder konfisziert wurde zum Teil. Ich glaube nicht, dass er gedarbt hat in den USA.
And that is an important thing to know, is that the Filipino people, these families are not just fighting for international law on our account, but for the world. And so we should hold our heads so high that we continue the legacy of justice, of toppling dictators. And as we walked up to the ICC behind the families, these families who have been fighting for justice, for their sons, for their brothers, for their loved ones for years, who have gone through such turmoil online, people telling them that they are going to rape them and murder them in the name of a murderer, the torture that these families have had to go through in order to seek justice. And really the last result, there is absolutely no way that Duterte and his cronies would ever be able to face court in the Philippines. And that shows us how broken the system is, but not just that the system is broken, but it was designed. It was always designed to be that way. It was always designed to grab power. It was always designed for politicians to put the money of the people into their pockets. And we say no, we say shame! 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 So as we walked up to the steps, behind these families, behind their courage, you could feel the air. It was a moment of history, my friends, a moment of history. To be there, to yell, Justicia! Justicia! That we demand, we hold our heads up high in dignity, for the dignity of our families, that we will not allow our loved ones to be slaughtered in the streets. Slaughtered in the streets for someone's paycheck. We will not allow it. We will not allow it to stand. And we see now in court that they have nothing. They have no evidence. They have no argument to support him. That the truth will finally come out. And that is our legacy. Is that we stand A panel, an independent panel of doctors checked this man out and he was fine. This man is a liar and his lies are being exposed. They say that in the amount of killings that was done during his time increased by 509%. 509%! That is insane! Shame! But we are seeing justice, my friends, even if it takes forever, even if it takes our whole life, we will see justice, even if we are walking up to those stairs with canes. We will see justice. And I just thank all of you for being here today to show our support and to continue our legacy of fighting for justice, but also for dignity. For dignity for our people, for our families. We are Filipinos and we hold our heads up high to fight for justice, not just for ourselves, but for the fucking world. So, say it with me! Duterte Panagutin! Duterte Panagutin! Duterte Panagutin!
Konsum, aber das Thema ist interessant. Wie gesagt, hier geht es um die EDSA-Revolution von 1986, eine friedliche Revolution in den Philippinen, bei der gegen Menschen friedlich gegen einen Diktator protestierten, der unter einem Panzer Kampfhubschrauber gegen das Volk einsetzte und auch als Massenmörder bekannt war. Und nach 3 Tagen sind sie den losgeworden. Können wir mal drüber nachdenken. Ach so, anders waren damals massive Wahlfälschungen gewesen, was dann den Tropfen fast zum Überlaufen gebracht hat.
It's not just the war on drugs which Duterte is guilty of. It is a legacy of impunity, corruption, violence, killings, and this is why we also connect it to the issue of martial law, the issue of corruption, and also Sarah. We have Rodrigo Duterte's daughter is the vice president of the Philippines right now, and the call is Sarah Lipisin. Sarah Lipisin! Sarah Lipisin! Duterte Panagutin!
Duterte Panagutin!
Marcos Singilin!
Marcos Singilin!
Sarah Lipisin!
Sarah Lipisin!
Okay, now we will hear from Gabriela.
Maraming salamat. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm Patricia.
Ja,
I'm
leider auf
delivering
Englisch sehr viel
statement
oder
on
fast
behalf
nur
of
bisher.
Gabriela Germany, an organization advancing women's rights.
Deswegen muss ich immer erklären, worum es
in the
geht.
Philippines from
Ich mag
here.
sogar ganz gerne.
Today we commemorate the 40th anniversary of EDSA People Power, one of the most pivotal moments in Philippine history. It is a powerful moment where the people stood united that toppled the fascist dictatorship of Marcos Sr. And as we reflect on this historic day, we also recognize the role that women played in resisting the deeply rooted regime. Many women were arrested, tortured, sexually abused, and killed fighting to oust this dictatorship. Today, we honor all those who bravely and tirelessly fought and continue to fight for truth, justice, and accountability in the Philippines. But no EDSA commemoration can take place without condemning the legacy of vile corruption and crimes of Marcos Sr., now being continued and proliferated by his son and current sitting president, Marcos Jr. In the Philippines, the series of mass protests over corruption have been dubbed the Trillion Peso March, owing to the literal trillions of pesos corrupted over flood control scams, pork barrel insertions, and many unprogrammed appropriations. Marcos Jr. himself has evaded accountability despite direct evidence of his involvement, pocketing at least 8 billion pesos since the start of his presidency. Meanwhile, Vice President Sara Duterte, who remains untouched over allegations of her misuse of over 600 million pesos in 2022 and 2023 alone, has already declared her presidential bid for 2028, and we cannot let her do that. We can no longer allow this system to persist. For decades after EDSA People Power, many of the same injustices and repression continue to persist. We continue to witness an alarming cycle where politicians and their favored businessmen grow richer, while the vast majority of our people endure high prices, stagnant wages, job insecurity, and gendered violence. This massive corruption is a blatant disregard of human dignity, as many Filipinos are forced to leave the country to seek better opportunities just to keep their family alive. Our countrymen continue to face devastating impacts of calamities that strike our nation that reveal systemic failures and keep our countrymen trapped in a cycle of poverty and exploitation. According to the World Risk Report in 2025, the Philippines is the country at most risk from natural disasters, and yet billions continue to be corrupted annually. And despite the ravage of typhoons from last year, no high officials have been jailed in still one of the biggest corruption scandals the country has also ever faced. And much like 4 decades ago, state fascism continues in full force, especially in countryside. Peasant and indigenous communities like in Mindoro and Nueva Vizcaya are being violently dispersed and bombed for foreign corporations to plunder the land, giving way for more government officials to corrupt and pocket money. Impunity reigns as our country remains to be one of the most dangerous places for journalists, land defenders, and activists who dare speak the truth to power. The enduring significance of EDSA shows us that unity and collective action of the people can overcome even the most entrenched oppression. It is in this spirit that we must not let the corrupt go unpunished. And so we call for the immediate resignation of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Vice President Sara Duterte for being masterminds of the large-scale systemic corruption scandals the country has ever faced. We demand the prompt prosecution of all officials and their business cohorts who continue to make profit from public office while the budgets for education, health, agriculture, and other public services remain insufficient. Enough is enough. Today, we relive and continue the spirit of resistance that inspired the People Power in 1986. The People Power continues the fight against corruption. The People Power continues the fight for truth, justice, and accountability. Ang tao! Ang bayan!
Ngayon ay lumalaban!
Ngayon ay lumalaban!
Ang tao! Ang bayan!
Maraming salamat po.
Lahat ng sangkot! Dapat managot!
Du, Mehmet, was soll jetzt daran eine Lüge sein? Die Zahlen sind belegbar. Es ist tatsächlich so, dass man mit ca. 10 Milliarden rechnet, die Herr, wie heißt er?
Gabriella. Yes,
Scheiße, jetzt korrigiert den Namen Diktator. Jeweils 10 Milliarden, etwa 100.000 Menschen, die gefoltert, eingesperrt wurden und während seiner Herrschaft.
I want to shout out to
Marcos, genau, Marcos
British
heißt er.
Mining Corporation, was a corporation that is wanting to explore the land in the Pakistan, okay? So, yeah, British mining out of the Philippines. And imperialist British mining out of the Philippines.
Er ist genauso gesichert, dass Marcos damals in die USA fliehen konnte mit Unterstützung der USA. Die setzten, glaube ich, 4 Hubschrauber unter anderem dazu ein, des US-Militärs. Er selber konnte sich mit knapp 10 Millionen in Sicherheit bringen, zumindest so der amerikanische Zoll. Also von daher, wo ist jetzt die Lüge?
Defend, defend, defend Nueva Vizcaya.
Defend! Defend! Defend Nueva Vizcaya!
Defend, defend, defend the Pakistan Norte.
Defend! Defend! Defend the Pakistan Norte!
Defend, defend, defend Mindoro.
Defend!
So, zur EDSA-Revolution. Ja, das kommt ihr auch immer bei YouTube, Luis.
Okay, our next speech
Zur
will be
EDSA-Revolution
from
können wir gerne heute Abend im Live-Chat mal noch ein bisschen was machen. Erzähle ich euch nachher noch ein bisschen was. Hier mal nur die Kurzversion, weil ich ansonsten ein Problem mit den Redebeiträgen kriege, dass sich dabei
Hi guys, I'm Angel from Gabriella, but I'll be doing the speech.
Also von den 10 Milliarden, mit denen er abbauen konnte, ist etwa gerade mal die Hälfte an den Philippinen zurückgegangen. Die andere Hälfte liegt auf irgendwelchen Schweizer Bankkonten, Offshore-Banken und ähnliches rum. Und ja.
Sabi saying, buhay, isa sa buhay ang diwa ng EDSA to live in the spirit of the EDSA-Revolution, and looking around me today, I can really see the spirit of the EDSA-Revolution here in Berlin, here in Germany, in the core of imperialist power. 40 years ago, millions of Filipinos flooded EDSA in a historic act of collective courage to oust the US-backed dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. It was the culmination of years of organizing, resistance, and sacrifice by workers, farmers, youth, church people, and communities across the country. The world witnessed what a united people can achieve. A united people can oust a dictator. But the struggle does not end there. The problems of landlessness in the Philippines continue today. The country remains dependent on foreign powers and bureaucrat capitalism, where politicians use their positions to steal from the people. This did not disappear after Marcos Sr. was ousted. While formal democracy was restored, quote-unquote, the system that creates poverty, corruption, forced migration, and repression remains intact to this day. Migrants were part of EDSA. Filipino workers overseas organized protests, exposed human rights violations, and amplified the call to end the dictatorship. From outside the country, we helped build international pressure that contributed to the regime's downfall. Our communities abroad stood firmly with the Filipino people. And the fight continues here, in the Netherlands, in Germany. Yet, it was also during the Marcos Sr. regime that labor export was strengthened as state policy. Instead of building national industries and creating enough decent jobs at home, the government promoted overseas work as a solution to the economic crisis. Millions were pushed to leave their families not by choice, but by necessity. Migration became survival. That's why I say, trabaho sa Pinas, hindi sa labas! Trabaho sa Pinas, hindi sa labas! 40 years later, the number of overseas Filipinos has grown to unimaginable heights. Remittances keep the economy afloat. Our earnings sustain families, pay for education and hospital bills, and even help the country survive during disasters. But what happens to that money? Corruption continues to drain public funds meant for flood control, healthcare, education, and the livelihood of our loved ones. Fake flood control projects and illegal budget insertions enrich the few, while the majority of the Filipinos struggle with rising prices and low wages. Corruption is not an abstract issue. It shouldn't be an issue at all. It is a direct attack on every overseas Filipino family. The money we earn through separation, hardship, and exploitation is undermined by a system that steals from public treasury. While powerful officials and their contractors grow richer, ordinary Filipinos at home and abroad carry the burden. Today, anti-corruption protests have reignited the spirit of people power. Despite investigations, high-ranking officials remain largely untouched. Some are allowed to resign without accountability. Impeachment complaints are dismissed. The national budget remains filled with pork. The people are once again reminded that we cannot rely solely on institutions controlled by the same political elites to deliver justice. We must seek it out ourselves. Marcos Duterte, walang pinag-iba.
Parehos tuta, diktador fascista.
Marcos Duterte, walang pinag-iba.
Parehos tuta, diktador fascista.
At the same time, repression continues. Peasant and indigenous communities face militarization and displacement. Activists are red tagged and harassed for speaking out. Broad alliances calling for accountability are denied permits and censored. On this anniversary, meant to honor a people's uprising against dictatorship, calls for resignation and justice are labeled as unacceptable. This shows how far the system is willing to go to protect itself. But we must not allow this. We also see how foreign interests continue to shape our country's direction. Military agreements and economic deals deepen dependency and open the Philippines to further exploitation. The country remains tied to external powers, while the needs of the Filipino people are neglected. As migrants in Germany and across Europe, we understand that our personal stories are connected to national realities. Families are separated because there are not enough secure and dignified opportunities at home. The roots of our migration lies in the same unjust system that EDSA sought to challenge. So on this 14th anniversary of EDSA, we celebrate the courage and unity of our people, but we also recognize that genuine economic and political change remains unfinished. The dictator was ousted, but his son is still there. And the conditions pushing Filipinos to leave their homeland still remain. We are evidence of that. Migrante Germany stands with the Filipino people and honoring this milestone of collective action and victory. We revive the spirit of EDSA, not as nostalgia, but as a living commitment to continue the fight for accountability, justice, and a future where no Filipino is forced to migrate out of desperation. Let us carry forward the torch of people power. Isabuhay ang diwa ng EDSA. Let us demand that all those involved in corruption be held accountable. And let us work for a Philippines where every family can live with dignity, security, and hope in our own homeland. Tuloy ang laban sa korupsyon, kahirapan at pasismo. Lahat ng sakot,
dapat managot!
lahat ng sakot,
Dapat managot!
Marcos Duterte, walang pinag-iba.
Parehong tuta, diktador, fascista!
Marcos Duterte, walang pinag-iba.
Parehong tuta, diktador, fascista!
Thank you.
Die internationale Solidarität!
So, wie gesagt, Thema ist die EDSA-Revolution, welche damals von sehr vielen Menschen in die Philippinen getragen wurde. Das war eine reine Jugendgeschichte, sondern wirklich völlig die gesamte Bevölkerung, welche vor 40 Jahren Herrn Marcos zur Flucht und zur Flucht in die USA bewog, nachdem er als Massenmörder die Philippiner ausgeplündert hat. Man rechnet etwa mit 10 Milliarden. Vielleicht auch ein paar Euros mehr.
The best decision that they can make, and it often is the best decision they can make, but we know that the working conditions and we know the working conditions for them in Germany are not fair, and we want to organize around that. So,
vor 40 Jahren war die EDSA-Revolution 1986 in Philippinen. Dabei ging es um Herrn Marcos, das war ein berüchtigter Massenmörder und Diktator seiner Zeit. Circa 100.000 Menschen ließ er foltern, einsperren, verschwinden oder richtete sie gleich hin, auch ohne Gerichtsverfahren.
So this is a testimony, a statement from someone
Und er selber plünderte die Philippinen mit etwa 10 Milliarden aus. Davon ist die Hälfte bis heute nicht verfügbar, sondern irgendwelchen Offshore-Konten, Schweizer Bankkonten lahmgelegt.
I am Kevin, I'm just a vessel for this message of a martial law survivor back in the Philippines in the 1986 EDSA People Power Revolution.
Mit Gebeten, Menschenketten, Gesang.
Compatriots, the Filipino Diaspora,
Und das bei so einem
and friends of the
Typen muss man
Filipino
so
people
sagen,
who struggle,
Respekt
who are with us.
Für die
In today's
Leistung.
commemoration of the
Und sie haben ihn dann
40th
nach 3
anniversary of
Tagen,
the EDSA
nachdem das
War,
Militär
with the
auch
people's
sich geweigert hatte,
uprising in
sich
1986,
gegen das Volk zu
which
richten,
ousted the brutal and corrupt dictatorship
trat er
of
dann die
Ferdinand
Flucht an
Marcos
mit Hilfe der
Sr.
USA nach
In the
Hawaii, wo er
Philippines
dann
today,
nach 3
tens
Jahren
of
im Exil
thousands marched
starb.
throughout the country and not
auf der
only
Flucht.
to commemorate the
Actually
historic
ist er noch ein
event,
bisschen was
but
anderes.
also to demand the resignation of the dictator's son,
Und die
who is
USA haben
now
jede
the president
Auslieferung
of
von
the
ihm
country,
abgeliefert, obwohl
and
er, wie
the
gesagt, wegen
impeachment of
übelster
Vice
Verbrechen
President
dran war.
Sara Duterte, the daughter of the former president Rodrigo Duterte, currently facing trial for crimes against humanity at the ICC for their leading roles in the blatant, rampant systemic corruption in the Philippines. I was a full-time organizer activist in the underground anti-dictatorship resistance movement when the uprising succeeded in ousting the hated Marcos dictatorship. The 1986 uprising was a historical landmark in the Philippine neo-colonial state history. It forced a regime changed by sheer strength of the protest movement against a totally isolated fascist dictatorship. It was the culmination of more than a decade of hard and difficult development of the anti-dictatorship resistance movement. The armed resistance of the New People's Army grew from only one region in 1969 to almost all of the strategic areas in the archipelago. Underground and open anti-dictatorship organizations proliferated. Paralyzing strikes were launched against repressive and anti-people policies of the government nationwide. Discontent were rife within the armed forces of the Philippines and the national police. The assassination of opposition leader Benigno Aquino Jr. in 1983 added fuel to the fire. Marcos was forced to call a snap elections under growing local and international pressure. He rigged the elections and proclaimed himself the winner against Cory Aquino, Benigno's widow, that further added to the nationwide outrage. The mutiny of then Police Chief Fidel Ramos and then Minister of Defense Juan Ponce Enrile, which was supported by Cardinal C by calling hundreds of thousands of Filipinos to rally in the EDSA highway, was the quote-unquote, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. Realizing the folly of continued support for the fascist dictatorship, U.S. forces whisked Marcos and his family from the Malacanang presidential palace to Hawaii. Eventually, U.S. imperialism supported the widow of slain opposition leader Benigno Aquino Jr., posing themselves as quote-unquote champions of democracy. It should be noted, however, that 5 consecutive U.S. presidents, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, and Reagan, supported Marcos' fascist dictatorship until the end, when it was very clear that their continued support may result in the destruction of the neo-colonial state. In the heyday of the Marcos dictatorship, the Philippines was a bastion of U.S. imperialist power projection in Asia. Johnson famously referred to Marcos as his right arm in Asia. Marcos was hailed as the democratic champion of quote-unquote new society. The U.S. military bases in the Philippines were staging areas for the U.S. aggression in Vietnam and other countries in Asia. I think the biggest lesson of the EDSA-1 uprising was that a united people can defeat a strong tyrant. EDSA-1 was followed by EDSA-2 uprising that ousted former President Estrada in 2001 due to blatant corruption. Another is that there should be thorough reforms after a successful uprising. The post-Marcos senior regimes failed to institute badly needed structural reforms. This favored the return of the Marcos family in power and the present gross systemic corruption scandal in the Philippines. Since the son of the dictator is now the president, the bigger portion of the family's ill-gotten wealth is still in their possession and was used to return to power. There is a systemic effort of historical revisionism, deodorizing the Marcos' legacy under Marcos Jr. presidency. An important lesson also is that U.S. imperialism supports autocratic and fascist regimes when it suits its geopolitical interests, and conveniently supports reserved forces in portraying itself as champion of democracy and human rights. If continued support to fascist dictatorship is untenable, let us honor the heroism of those who sacrificed and laid their lives for the successes of the EDSA-1 uprising, by affirming our determination to continue the struggle for national and social liberation. Long live the Philippine masses. Long live the friends of the Filipino people in struggle. Down with U.S. imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism. Maraming salamat.
Luis, Lass die Angebote auch bei YouTube drin sein. Lernen Sie mal wenigstens ein bisschen was. Nämlich wisst ihr 10.
Capitalismo, Marcos mismo, Duterte mismo, Maki Baka,
So, wir verabschieden uns jetzt erstmal. Ganz gerne habe ich jetzt erstmal. Da können wir jetzt was machen. Oh, meinen letzten Blick.
That means fight, do not be afraid. And when we hear the testimonies of the freedom fighters before us, that is the message to us, to our second
Wir machen noch
journey.
einen letzten Blick drauf. Und ziehen erstmal von dann nach einer Stunde. Ja, aber die Redebeiträge sind komplett auf Englisch, das ist ziemlich anstrengend. So, ja, die Kamera ist ab. So, wie gesagt, interessantes Thema auf jeden Fall. Friedliche Revolution vor 40 Jahren in den Philippinen, die sogenannte EDSA-Revolution. Ich wusste selber nicht bis heute, dass es die gab, oder hatte nicht auf dem Schirm. Ich wusste nur, es gab mal einen Diktator, der hieß Marcos. Und der hatte eine Frau, die alles Mögliche gesammelt hat. Da können wir mal einen Blick drauf werfen. Ihr seht ja selber. Klein, aber fein. Ja, ein bisschen linkslastig, aber es sei denn fast schön ziehen.
Good evening, friends, comrades. I'm so honored to be here with you today to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the EDSA.
Und wie gesagt, also man rechnet etwa mit 100.000 Opfern bei Herrn Marcos, die entweder getötet wurden, massenweise gefoltert, verstümmelt, vergewaltigt, ja, das Übliche. Er selber versuchte 10 Milliarden Dollar damals in Sicherheit zu bringen. Und auf jeden Fall ein wahnsinnig faszinierendes Thema. Und wir gehen jetzt mal noch ein bisschen hier durch die Gegend. Richtung Brandenburger Tor. Nein, wir gehen Richtung Bob. Auf jeden Fall interessant. War schön mit euch. Danke euch. Und wie gesagt, also wenn jetzt, sage ich mal so, ihr könnt euch an meinem Live, ist auch bei YouTube, könnt ihr euch austoben. Ist jederzeit legitim. Bitte nicht spammen. Ich habe jetzt eine Moderationsfunktion entdeckt. Und schmeißt euch dann auch bei YouTube raus. Haha, wer da rumspammt. So. Heute Abend gibt es einen TikTok Live wieder auf Friedrichsberger. Einfach bei TikTok reinschauen. Und da können wir dann neben Redemption 2, wo ich wieder durch den Wilden Westen reite, könnt ihr euch dann auch anschauen, ein paar Videos von heute. Beziehungsweise sage ich noch mal kurz was zur EDSA-Revolution, da gehe ich noch mal ein bisschen detaillierter drauf ein. Das war jetzt nur die Kurzversion, die ich gesagt habe. Und warum zeige ich so eine Sache eigentlich ganz gerne? Weil ja, ich lese ja meine Bibel. Wie kann ich eigentlich alles sagen? Leute, was riskiert ihr eigentlich, wenn er mal dich darüber aufmacht? Gar nichts. So. Was haben die Leute auf den Philippinen riskiert? Also wenn man sich jetzt so vorstellt, wie sagt Diktator Marcos mit Massenmorden, Folter, Verschwinden lassen, drum und dran, ist schon ein ganz anderes Kaliber. Und dann stellen sich die Menschen dahin und protestieren friedlich mit Gebet, Kerzen, Menschenketten und dann Pipapo dagegen. Also hat man nicht mal ein bisschen Mut, eure Klappe aufzukriegen. Die Kundgebung soweit ohne besondere Vorkommnisse. Ich hätte mit ein bisschen mehr gerechnet, aber gut. Aber jetzt geht es erstmal ab nach Hause. Wir machen noch Feierabend. Wir werden noch kurz einen Blick auf den Reichstag. Ah, hier ist ein Gebäude des Deutschen Bundestages. Gut, machen wir Feierabend. Und wir sehen uns dann nachher. Judy, ich muss jetzt nämlich gleich mal Karochen anrufen. Also, wer auf YouTube Caro nicht kennt, das ist eine junge Dame, mit der ich zusammenarbeite. Die ist auch demnächst auf YouTube im Livestream. Die hat auch hier einen Kanal. Den zeige ich nachher nochmal. Aber gut, wir machen jetzt noch Feierabend. Bis dann. So, YouTube ist Tschüss. Und danke auch an alle.